Hi, I'm Dave Engelbretson, and along with LeRoy Hyatt, we'd like to welcome you to another edition of Fly Tying, the Angler's Art. We're going to cover quite a span tonight because we're going to start with tying a very small, tiny dry fly that is prevalent in all parts of the country, east, Midwest, west, all over, wherever you find trout fishing. Then we're going to tie a big western stonefly, and we're going to finish off with the Hornburg, a very popular universal streamer pattern. So we start with this little Trico. Now the Trico is an excellent hatch to fish. It's a morning hatch. It starts in the morning and gets a little later during the day. And when it comes depends on where you are in the country too. But we'll tell you more about it as we start tying it. What are we going to use to tie the Trico Spinner with?
Not much material needed for this one, Dave. Again, a dark dun hackle for the two tail fibers. We'll use a gray poly for the wing, black dubbing for this particular one. They do come in a lot of different colors, but for this one we'll use black, and I'll use a standard dry fly thread. Actually, you know, they don't come in too many different colors. There's the male and the female, and the males are black, and the females generally have a little lighter body, and that's about it for the real Trico. Okay, well, I've just seen them in books that they show a lot of different
What do they know?
Oh, well, okay.
Don't believe everything you read. Don't you see newspapers?
All right, I'll put just
a
very small little bit of, I just pulled it off, dubbing on. We'll make just a very small ball here.
Just to split the tails.
Just to split the two tails. That's all I'm wanting to do.
You know, I think I know the earliest time I ran into the Tricos at first was back in the mid-60s. George Harvey was one of the first ones to know about and identify this hatch. I may be off base, I don't think so, but the guys down around Harrisburg fishing the Latort, Marinero and Fox and those guys, they were talking about the Canis hatch, or some say the Canis hatch, and they hadn't really identified it as such. And George caught a few of these things and sent them to a biologist, an entomologist, who identified them at that particular species as Trichoerithides atratus, and that's where most of us started hearing about and fishing the Trico hatches. And at that time, very few people knew about it because it was a morning hatch. And George would take me out on Spruce Creek, and we would have some just incredible fishing to large fish that would come in, and these were so numerous that they just sipped them on in, and we had some fine fishing. Of course, this is one of the flies they fished the gulpers in Madison Lake.
Sure. Okay, I've dubbed a little ball on the rear. Now I've put the two hackle fibers in. Got three there, clip that one off. And now I'm just going to dub just a small little body up to where the wing will be. Go back over that.
You know what's really unusual about the natural insect is in most mayflies, the dun will hatch and then go off to the streamside vegetation for several days and molt and become the spinner. But in the case of the Tricos, they go through the whole life cycle in midair in the matter of an hour or so. They will hatch as a dun, they will molt and become the spinner while they're flying, they will mate in midair and die without ever landing.
Oh, is that right?
It all happens at once, and it's talk about ephemeral, boy, that's it. It's very short-lived lifespan. Their whole life cycle is keyed towards hatching, becoming the dun, becoming the spinner, mating and dying.
Do they do this all within just a very few hours?
Oh yeah,
or
within
days?
an hour or two.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very short-lived. So
now I've got the wing tied on. Now I'll put just a minimal amount of dubbing back on just so I can figure eight around that wing.
This is why you don't very often see Trico duns, because they transform from the dun to the spinner in midair, and it's the spinner fall that the fish are feeding on. They don't get much shot at the duns. A lot of people wonder, why don't you ever see a Trico dun? You always see Trico spinners. Well, that's the reason.
I've got too much dubbing on there.
Simple fly to tie, but you've got to keep your dubbing pretty sparse.
Very, very sparse.
Pretty sparse.
It sure does.
Very delicate fly. And of course, with the poly wings and a little bit of dry fly floating down there, these things
it ought to float
flush
well.
right in the surface film. They look quite realistic.
And there's a little trico.
Yeah. Why don't you rotate that vise a little bit?
There you can see the split
Yeah,
wing,
yeah.
or the split tail, I mean, and the split wing.
Mhm.
And that fly will float quite low in the water, but it's a very good likeness.
But the fish can see it.
Fish can see it. There's a trico. It's got dark dun hackle fibers for the tail. The body is all black dubbing. The wing is gray poly.
And incidentally, some people tie those with white poly wings
Mhm.
too. You got your choice there. Now we've just tied the tiny little Trico Spinner, universally used trout fly in the United States at least. Now we're going to jump out to the west and go to the other extreme and tie a fairly large stonefly imitation, Calbird's bird stonefly.
Dry fly.
Dry fly, right.
Okay, material for this one, we'll use a dyed brown hackle. This happens to be a saddle hackle. We'll use natural brown bucktail for the wing. The wing will be tied Trude style. The antenna and the tail material will be stripped hackle fibers. Now this can also be, in place of the stripped hackle, you could use brown monofilament. Here is the thread that we'll use, just a yellow, and the body material will be tied with yellow floss. Now I've clipped the barb, I've put in a size 8 2x long hook in the shank, in the vise. I'll dress that shank and run to the rear. Now I'm going to take these two stripped hackles that we have here. I'm going to clip those two butts off. We don't need them. And the fly, when it's tied, the tail will naturally taper down smaller. So I'm going ahead and tie that in, the small end to the rear. I will come back and trim all that off later. Right now I'm just wanting to get it tied on. And then the two here I will leave in place and they will become the antenna. I'm going to take a hackle and put in here, which will be palmered forward. Just lay it down, tie it in. Then we'll get a section of this floss. Now this is a 4-strand floss. This time I'm going to use all 4 strands for this body material.
And I'm anxious to see you do that. Do you try to keep it flat and not separated, or do you try to twist it? Or?
No, I try to keep it flat. Sometimes it's with great difficulty, but most of the time you can.
It's probably easier to keep it flat when you cut the pieces and hold in your fingers rather than
Yes.
coming off a bobbin.
Yes.
I find invariably when I leave it in the bobbin with 4 strands, it does nasty things to me.
Well, and then when I'm doing it with my fingers, the closer you hold it toward the hook itself, the tighter it will be, the tighter it will keep it. Now I'm going to take 1 wrap of this body material behind the hackle. Then I'm going to come forward with this body material. And see, it's flattening out.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's flattening out
nice.
very nicely, and I think that's a much better way to do it than try to do it in a bobbin where it twists and it gets ridges and bulky. And
sometimes if your fingers are rough, it'll have a tendency to want to fray it.
yeah. One thing you can do, of course, with rough fingers is you can keep emery cloth there, emery paper. You can use hand lotion. You can use 600 sandpaper. And the other thing that helps is if you grab the floss in one place, don't slide it through your fingers.
Constantly sliding.
Grab it in one
yes.
place and move it, then grab it another place and wrap it, but don't slide your fingers down it.
Now I'm going to palmer this hackle forward as evenly as I can and tie it off in this same area. Now you see I've left quite a little bit of room here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how far forward you went with that.
Well, I'm probably just a little over half, maybe not quite 2/3, because I've got to tie a trude wing here and a hackle.
Now you've used the word trude a number of times. That's T-R-U-D-E, not true, but trude. And tell us what a trude wing is. A lot of people
it's
might
just
not know that.
an extending wing from this section. It will be behind the hackle itself,
It's basically a down
a
wing.
down wing style.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to come in and trim this hackle that I've just wrapped on as evenly as I can and short. What this is going to basically be is legs for this stonefly, and it does give a very distinct.
Well, I really wonder if that's legs, because a stonefly doesn't have legs sticking out all the way along its body.
I know, but I don't know what else it would represent.
Fuzzy stuff.
Fuzzy stuff. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like fuzzy stuff
Fuzzy
to me.
stuff. All right, now I'm going to take a little bit of the natural brown bucktail, get rid of all that under fur that I can,
bet
all
you're
the
gonna
loose
stack
stuff,
it.
and I'm going to stack it. Make it a little even. Whether or not it makes any difference to the fish or not, I don't know, but it makes a difference to me. Well, I've got one that won't
And
go
this
in.
can be a fairly bulky wing.
Yes, it can.
It looks like you're using a fairly sparse wing, but it can be fairly bulky too,
Mm-hmm.
because these stoneflies have a lot of heft to them.
Well, when I bunch it together, it may look like it's a little bit heavier. You can see it's somewhat heavier now. Now I'm going to just lay it there on top and break my thread.
Well, is that part of the pattern, or
Mhm.
is that something that just occasionally happens?
Or were you impressed with that?
Well, I was, because it happens so naturally. I mean, it was almost as if you didn't even have to think about doing it.
Oh, I don't think about breaking it.
Oh.
It just
I don't
automatically
think much of it either.
Now, we'll try it again. Hopefully that's still going to be fairly well stacked. I'll lay it on there. Have it just beyond the bend of the hook. Lay it down, pinch it, and wrap it down. I'll stand this up. Don't trim your antenna off here now. Trim these at an angle. Got a couple of stragglers. And trim them at an angle. Now I'm going to take some rubber base glue and touch this wing I just put on, the butt section of that. That will really seal
Good
that
idea
down
for durability.
in place.
And I guess just looking at the fly now, I probably tend to use just a little more wing material, maybe more than I'd have to, I don't know. But
Yeah, just
that looks great.
now I've got another saddle hackle here. I'm going to tie it in. Bring my tying thread forward. And this will be fairly heavily hackled, although when I'm all through with it, I'm going to trim it totally. I think
How do you mean trim it?
I'm going to trim the hackle top and bottom so there's nothing there sticking out on the side, but just the sides of this hackle. And I think you're right. I think if I were to do the next one, I would put just a little bit more wing material in it, although this would be a very suitable fly. I guarantee it will catch fish.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm going to separate my antenna. I'm going to lift those two and wrap in front of them just to give them a little bit of an upsweep. I'm going to trim them off even. I'm going to come back here at the back, stand these two up, and trim those off even. I'll put a small whip finish on here. Don't need a whole lot of wraps.
Well, it's hard for me to see from here. I'm not sure how long you've got those antennae, but they don't have to be real long to match the
No.
natural.
No.
The naturals aren't real long, maybe a quarter of an inch on that fly or so. I don't know what you've got there, but
A little bit longer than that.
Uh-huh.
This will be about the length of a Goddard caddis. We can shorten them up.
no, I think whatever you usually tie is the way to do it.
And now that's trimmed top and bottom. So the only thing sticking out
Yeah,
on
why-
this fly
Why don't you
now,
rotate it just a bit? And that'll show the legs on the side, and it'll show the antenna. That's it, yeah.
there you can see the
Yeah.
antenna sticking out here in the rear.
Yeah,
Back here, you can see, or the tailing, I mean.
tail.
And the hackle is trimmed top and bottom, so it will sit very, very low in the water.
Yeah.
Very, very effective fly.
Yeah.
And that's the
again, just
birdstone dry.
Individual variations.
Sure.
If I were tying it, I think I'd put a little more wing in and
I
have
would.
a little shorter antenna.
Next one, I would definitely tie in
uh,
more wing.
Looks good. And again, we'll say that that's a very popular imitation, whether there's any golden stones or whatever about anyway.
It's a good
fly.
attractor. Good attractor
Yep.
fly.
Bird stonefly.
Birdstone fly dry. It's got a brown stripped hackle quills for antenna and tail. It's got yellow floss body, palmered with brown hackle that's trimmed short, has a natural bucktail wing, brown hackle trim top and bottom.
For our last fly today, we're going to tie kind of an unusual and versatile fly. It's called either the Hornburg, or some people call it the Hornburg Special. And I've always fished it as a streamer, and LeRoy, you said you've fished it more often even as a dry. So
fly.
That'll be interesting to talk about. What do we use to tie a Hornburg?
Well, again, a few material to go into it. It might look a little bit like it's going to be harder to tie because of all the material, but it's really not. 2 hackle colors, a brown and a grizzly, which will mix in the front. Jungle cock. Now, jungle cock, a lot of people may not have. It is now legal in the United States.
Yeah, they're raising it domestically. You can't import it, but it's expensive as the dickens.
If you have it, fine. If you don't, you could use put in a black feather, a small one with a smaller white one on top of that.
Well, or you could use something like guinea fowl that's got spots
any
on
of
it.
that. The body material will be gold tinsel. The underwing will be yellow bucktail, and the wing will be mallard breast feather. I'm going to use a size 10. This is a 4X long hook. That way Dave and I will compromise. It could be either fished as a streamer on this size hook or a dry fly.
I was interested when you told me you normally use a 2X long hook.
I sure have.
Which makes sense if you're fishing it like a dry.
Mm-hmm. Now for the body, we'll use a gold tinsel. Silver, I'm sure, could also be used for this, but I do use it in the gold. Tie it in, and I'm going to get my tying thread back toward the front. And now I'll just wrap this gold tinsel forward.
Now that's another thing that we do a little differently. I usually double wrap my body for whatever reason. Tie in the tinsel in front, wrap it to the back, and then double wrap it towards the front, and even touch it with a little head cement to
make it a
little more durable.
I guess I've done it this way because I normally fish it dry, and that would put that additional.
Put that much more weight.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, there's the body. Now we'll take the little bit of yellow bucktail. Now you could also use yellow calf tail on this if you wanted. I don't know.
The thing that's nice about the bucktail is it tends to lie flatter along the hook, which lets you then get the mallard breast or flank feathers also very flat.
I'll tie that in, laying it down there, and I'll trim this off at an angle, like so. I am going to put a little bit rubber-based cement on that. I don't want it to rotate.
Yeah. That's always a good idea when you're using the hair-type wings.
It'll really bind it down. That way it'll stay longer for you. Now I'm going to go ahead and run my tying thread loosely through that and then come back hard. And now I'll take the 2 mallard breast feathers. And you can see I've left quite a bit of room here. And maybe this is the way I do it because I fish it as a dry fly. You may do it differently.
Put more hackle on it.
Put more hackle on. First time I ever saw this fly was in Pinedale, Wyoming, fishing a little lake over there called Soda Lake. Unbelievable fish in there, and I'd never heard of this fly until then. But had a phenomenal week over there fishing for them.
Well, now again, I've never fished it in still water. I've always fished it in rivers. But again, it shows the versatility of the fly. And you can see with the eye, jungle cock eye in there, cheek, when that thing gets wet, it's going to look quite like a little minnow.
Natural, yes.
But if you're floating it up on top, of course, it can be an injured minnow, a crippled minnow, or who knows what.
Now I'm going to lay this other one concave against the first one, just like I put in there.
And a little trick that people should know about to get those things to lie flat is just leave a little bit of bare stem, and then just pull them forward, pulling them under the thread, and that'll tuck them tightly together. And the same trick you'll use, I'm sure, when you put the jungle cock on. Tie it in a little long, and then pull it gently under the couple of turns of thread, and that flattens it right out.
Now we'll get rid of those.
The side. Yeah.
And then I'll come back to that first section again where I left off. And take just a couple of little small, now they don't call these feathers, they call them nails.
Nails, yeah, jungle cock nails.
I don't know where that came from, but...
well, it's an old term, and again, we want to reemphasize that these are legal jungle cock now because they're being raised domestically, but you'll pay a very good price
Yes, you will.
to get either them individually, they sell them in pairs, or to buy the whole cape. Quite expensive.
Now what I'm going to do is I've laid that against there. Now I'm just going to pull it slightly. You can see it move. I can adjust it wherever I want on the feather. Take another wrap and
Isn't
I'm
that
going
nice?
to clip that off.
This would be another good place for a spot of that cement.
Let me put this one on first.
Yeah, no,
and
that's
then
what I
will.
mean, yeah. Another trick is sometimes you will get jungle cock feathers or capes where the fibers themselves are split, the feathers are split. And here's a good use for that rubber-based cement, to simply put a drop on either side of the feather and stroke it with your finger, and then set them aside to dye, and it'll bind those things together.
Sure will.
You won't even know that the splits were there. And you can salvage a lot of tough-looking feathers by using that rubber-based cement on them.
And they're far too expensive to throw
And you
away.
can use head cement too, but the rubber-based cement's even
It
better.
will stay longer.
It's,
Yes,
there's
it
a little
will.
flexibility there.
Now again, I'll bind that down tightly. But you can see now, there's the jungle cock on that side, jungle cock on this side. It just makes nice little cheeks on there.
Yep.
Makes it look very realistic.
Well, it's supposed to represent the eye of the minnow, because this originally was a minnow imitation. And with just the single mallard flank feathers there, you'll get a little bit of that yellow underwing showing through, and it's very realistic.
Very realistic. No, I remember my dad, I had not started tying flies yet, and we were on that little lake there at Pinedale, and he had gone over and bought 3 or 4 of these Hornburgs. Terribly tied flies. In fact, he cast the wings off before they ever got to the water.
And you were fishing them dry?
Fishing them dry. The fish were rising around us, and you could lay one in a rise where it just was.
There was a minnow hatch on that day.
A minnow hatch, there you are. I don't know what they were
Yeah.
taking them for, but I can still remember one take I had. I'd made a horrible cast, just balled up in front of me. I saw the fish come up, turn sideways, grab the fly, and I can still see my line as it's going through the water with the little water weight coming off of it. I never caught up with the fish. All I saw him was the take. But it was sure a fun day of fishing.
You know, sometimes I've caught a lot of good fish, but the ones I really remember are the good ones that I missed or that I lost.
Oh, sure. That's always the way.
Yeah. I
But that's-
remember the first big fish I ever had on. I was fishing on Spring Creek in Pennsylvania, and my little sulfur came drifting along, and it followed that curl down a little log and just disappeared. And I lifted the rod and gently set the hook, and all hell broke loose, this huge brown. And I know my jaw just dropped over, and I stood there frozen with my arm up in the air and the rod, and I didn't know what to do, and it was thrashed across the top of the pool and was gone, as biggest brown I ever saw.
And you'll never
And I'll never forget it.
That's right. That's right. No, you're right. Sometimes the ones that get away are the ones that you remember the longest.
And that's what keeps bringing us back.
But that's a Hornburg. Now, that's my version of a Hornburg, and that is tied probably too heavily hackled if you were going to fish it as a streamer. It would probably work. If it did soak up water, I'm sure it would probably
sure it
sink
would.
and do the
Sure.
job. But you can see how those little nails just really make nice-looking cheeks on that fly.
No, I think if I were going to tie it as a streamer, as I usually do, I wouldn't use so much hackle. But again, if you're going to think about fishing it on or near the surface, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
So I'd suggest people tie a few both ways.
But there's a Hornburg. It's tied with mallard breast flank. It's tied with jungle cock, a gold tinsel body, and brown and grizzly hackle mix for the hackle.
And you know, we're about out of time, folks, so I think we'll just thank you for watching and wrap it up here and say tune in again next week, and we're going to have some more good stuff for you. Have a good week of tying. Bye.
Dave and LeRoy have produced a new 90-minute video on fly tying techniques. To order a copy, call the number on your screen. These tips are only $28.95 plus $3.95 shipping and handling. Please have your credit card ready and call 1-800-883-0124 to order fly tying techniques. You can also order the programs in this series. There are 3 programs on each 90-minute tape for $22.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-883-0124 and order your fly tying videos or the techniques tape.